finally here. You finally arrived. You've at last found the one place which holds the answers to the questions of the ages. You're excited. Your heart palpitates. Is it real? Can it be true? You're understandably hesitant, yet determinedly hopeful. That is good. Your faith in such matters will be rewarded. You'll not find pat and cliched answers here. No! Here is a place of clarity, of definition, of explanation, of truth. Here combines science and religion, removes tradition and replaces it with fact. Here the universe is holographic, yet tangible, ethereal, yet substantive. Here is a place where time is understood as atemporal. Here there is harmony amidst chaos. Here is where the darkened glass is finally cleared. Here is where you'll find the answers to all the unanswered questions which stretch across the cosmos.
And you are across the cosmos for the next hour. I am Chase Rockwell. I am your host. I am joined once again in studio by my co-hosts,
Lou Rogers
and
Mark Wilson.
Last week we discussed, is there something out there? In short, are there extraterrestrials? Have we been visited? Have they come to us? Can we go to them? Is it reasonable to believe that in this entire universe there could be other sentient, conscious, self-aware life existing on another planet? Well, as a Christian, that's an interesting question. It falls into a whole variety of different camps, from those who assert very stridently the fact that no, there cannot be anything out there because God didn't say it in the Bible, to, yes, extraterrestrials are examined and explained in length through the scriptures, but one has to look more intently through less of a lens of orthodoxy. For example, in Ezekiel, we have the wheel within a wheel, which is a clear description of some sort of an extraterrestrial craft. We have Elisha being taken up in a whirlwind, a chariot of fire. Now, we have depictions, of course, of this chariot of fire as a literal chariot, a carriage being drawn by horses, which are all on fire. Now, these are Renaissance, for the most part, Renaissance depictions from artists, and this is what they've come up with. But essentially, you are going back to a time when verbiage was simply trying to explain in the way that they possibly could what they saw. But it's an interesting depiction nonetheless. Why would Elisha, and if one goes back to the Book of Enoch and to the Book of Jasher, find that Enoch was taken from this earth in bodily form in the exact same fashion, in a whirlwind, in a chariot of fire. And in both cases, the atmosphere oxidized, and there was particulate matter that fell to the earth in much the same way you would find a modern-day rocket or jet oxidizing, leaving contrails, etc. This all happened in antiquity, and the people who witnessed it at that time and chronicled it for our edification all these thousands of years later used descriptive means at their disposal. It was a chariot of fire, and what fell looked like snow. Clearly it wasn't snow. So we're going to resume with this very fascinating topic and look at it from both perspectives. Is it feasible that we could find some sort of corporeal, sentient, self-aware, conscious life within our ability to reach? And as a Christian or a person of faith, how does that impact your belief in God? Can you be a Christian and subscribe to the fact that there are aliens out there? And if they're out there, as C.S. Lewis pointed out, are they fallen like us? And if they have fallen, are they subjected to the same strictures with respect to sin? Are they redeemable? Did Christ redeem them? Did God bring to them their own version of a Messiah? So, interesting topic. Let's get back to it. All right, now, I want to get back to what it was you were going to talk about before I went on to his last question.
Well, I think, let me go in this direction.
You were going to discuss the holographic universe, and I really want to get into that because first I think you need to define You started to, and then you didn't. Define the holographic universe as you understand it.
Well, that's pretty broad. The holographic universe would mean that what you see out there is a hologram. And we've all seen holograms. If you've gone to Disneyland, you ride in that haunted mansion, little ride, and you go through and see this little witch or whatever. But we've seen them in other places too, and they're becoming more prolific in our societies as we want to use advertising, and they will in the future. But holograms are a 3D image of, but it's really 2D. Projected as a 3D image. And so what that's saying is that the universe out there, apart from you and your consciousness, is a hologram.
That sounds very socio-simplistic to me.
Well, what it does is it's much more simplistic to create, and it would mean that what is real is here and us, and what is not real is out there and is the universe.
And what do you have to base this hypothesis on?
The size of the universe, the age of the universe, if you take it from a Christian perspective and you read Genesis without the idea of a holographic universe
and it's
in
10,000
mind,
years old.
Then you have a major problem. You're either
Why?
Moses got his notes wrong.
Why?
Well, because of the age of our Earth, of the age of humanoids on the Earth.
But Moses doesn't give us an age.
Well,
he doesn't even intimate an age.
When you say in the beginning, even if you use Yam as the idea of I think that was a name for it.
The term that was rendered in Hebrew is Yam.
Right, which means
it's just a
chaos
of time.
And completion, and nobody know we.
Like you mean an age,
we remember it in solar
things.
days based on the Genesis text because that's how he gave us I guess it's almost like a creed to remember so that we can get an understanding. We understand solar days. So we understand on day one, that's not the actual phraseology.
But that's not how it
was on
translated.
time frame number one. This is what happened.
In era number 1, era number 2, era number 3.
And there could have been millions
era number 4.
Of years in between those eras. Today, we would say it's one day. So you have literalists today in the churches who believe that everything was created in 6 solar days, and on the 7th day, quote, God rested.
Because
Adam was a busy SOB on the 6th day.
They mistranslated Yom. They moved it from its passage of time to a literal 24-hour calendar day, when that's not what it meant at all, and that's not what it implied.
Right. And you can't change the minds of some of these people.
I'm not trying to change necessarily the minds. A little education will go a long way. Mm-hmm. If you want to be firmly attached to the fact that there was 6 calendar days, whose calendar? Saturn's?
Right.
Pluto's?
Also, what has to be incorporated into the understanding of the Genesis text is that it was not written in Hebrew. So we only come into contact with it through a Hebrew perspective. And so you say, what does that mean? It means that, as we spoke earlier, if you look at an earlier podcast, the Genesis account, the entire 5 books of the Torah, written by Moses, most of them, were written in a Egyptian hieratic script. And about 400 to 1,000 years later, it morphed into a Hebrew script, which means it had to be translated from the Egyptian hieratic into the Hebrew text. And unless Moses was there saying this is exactly what this meant and what that meant, we're going to miss some things. One of the things we miss is the understanding and concept of time frame. When it was rendered into the Masoretic text of the Jews and then into the King James Bible, they used the word year for that time frame. So for 400 years, people have been looking at on day 1, it was morning, it was evening, first day, morning, evening, second day. And so when you try and tell them, nah, that's not how it was, they get angry.
Well, I understand they get angry, but the morning and day more accurately translates into chaos and order. Mm-hmm. The term day is rendered as era or passage of time.
Right. The King James translators that translated the Masoretic text into the English language of the time, did not understand how to make that into a proper term.
Well,
so they used the word that they were best associated with.
Here's the whole problem when we start discussing ancient Hebrew. Ancient Hebrew was a spoken language. The majority of the people didn't write. They didn't read, but they spoke the language. And just like when I was in Japan, the word hashi could mean chopstick, or it could mean bridge, or it could mean corner. The only way you knew what it meant was by the way they pronounced the word, where they put emphasis on the word. And when you take a spoken language like ancient Hebrew, where they might pronounce yom a certain way for an unknown amount of time, and yom for a day, a solar day from sun up to sundown, or yom for a 24-hour period, we don't know how they pronunciated the words.
Well, it wasn't so much the pronunciation. The terminology is used primarily contextually. So by its context, you understand its meaning and its application.
Well, in some aspects, yes.
Right. The idea of the account was so that the average person of that time could understand and comprehend there is a creator, and he created this creation, all that we can see. And incorporated into that, the idea of cosmos was all they could see with their eyes. Today, our idea of cosmos has nothing to do with what we can see with our eyes, but everything to do with what we can see with the apparatus we've created. So we know that our universe is far, far, far more vast than their understanding of universe back then.
Well, it's to the point now, there's a movement within the Big Bang Theory that there wasn't one Big Bang, but multiple
bangs.
Big Bangs throughout the universe.
That's asinine. I can explain that later.
Well, yeah, we get into the physics of it, and it just doesn't work, but they still run with it.
So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that there are beings on other planets, other solar systems, etc. What would be the purpose of God doing that?
I can't go there just yet. I'm not trying to be a stick in the mud, but I can't go there and share in the experience that there's other beings on other planets just yet.
I can play the what-if game.
Are we agreed that what we've encountered isn't them?
From what I see and the information I have at hand, is that the beings we've encountered on this earth via the UFO phenomena, the abduction phenomena, the landings, the sightings, and so forth, all
going all the way back to antiquity.
Antiquity, yeah.
Wheels in the sky.
Just a quick little interjection. You have two Enoch, not Enoch, Elijah and Elisha.
Yes.
Who Elisha was like the understudy of Elijah.
And he was a minor prophet compared to the major prophet.
Right, and he had to go, and he knew he had to go, and he was going to go to a certain position and point, and he knew that something was going to happen there, so he kept telling Elisha to wait, and Elisha kept following him, and to the point where he peeks over this area, and what he describes is a chariot of fire coming down from the sky, landing and picking up Elijah and then going back up into the sky, and it's gone. So today we think of chariot of fire. We know that, we have all these pictures from the Renaissance time, which really was a terrible time to depict religion.
Well, they did it at the best of their ability.
And they show horses on fire pulling a chariot, which is asinine. Okay,
well, I understand why they.
The reason it was called a chariot. Now you understand that's the King James vernacular, chariot of fire, that was taken from the Hebrew rendering, which meant that it was a contraption that they were familiar with, that humans go inside to be transported.
It was their known means of conveyance.
A fire can simply mean that there was something coming out of the back or the sides.
So you mean it could have been a Model T with a little leaky oil ring and blowing smoke?
It was some kind of a vehicle which emitted some kind of a fire, a flame, a propulsion.
Right.
Now, today we see that all the time with jets. But can you imagine being that, here's Elisha looking over the ridge going, oh my gosh, what is that?
So question, if these are angels or spiritual entities, why would they need to employ a quote-unquote chariot of fire?
Star Trek 5. Wait a minute. Why does God need a starship?
What does God need with a starship?
Well, yeah.
Very good.
And
Very
that
good, very
was
good
the question that Kirk asked God.
A horrible
because
movie, but a very true question.
Kirk asked, quote-unquote, God why he needed a starship, not why Kirk needed a starship.
Yeah.
My question's a little bit different. The angels, or these spiritual entities, clearly don't need such means of conveyance. But they
It says who?
But they evidently, says me. Because they've not been used in other instances before. But here's where I'm going with this.
How do you know?
Elijah was not transported through death. Neither was Enoch. And their journeys are eerily similar. Okay?
It's a physical conveyance by a vehicle.
By a physical being.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And there's the commonality. There's the rub. Okay, if you are going to transport a physical being off of this planet, you need to abide by the known laws of physics.
Of physics,
and
right.
give him a friggin' ship to do it. Otherwise, you take him up in the air, you're going to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because there's very little air as you go higher, and it gets damned cold.
Well, they want to be spiritual always.
I understand they want to be spiritual always. A spiritual entity doesn't need such a contraption. But if they're going to move a human being,
right,
whole different story. Now, this is where I find Christians simply look at you like you're stupid. Mm-hmm. But help me out. Is this not at least consistent? Right. Enoch was taken the exact same way, and there was the exact... In the Enoch situation where Enoch was taken up, and I believe we discussed this before, there was a whitish material that fell to the ground after causing a little small, I guess for lack of a better term, it caused it to rain in the antediluvian period where there was never any rain. Whatever this thing was that
with
took
Elijah,
Enoch
there
up,
was a white substance too.
Exactly. Right. It oxidized the atmosphere and caused a mini rain shower.
Right. So on the one hand, you've got angels that can appear and disappear. Jacob's ladder, he sees them coming out of something above him.
Yes.
Now, in order to, if the human being, how far we can really see, he's laying down. Now, was it a vision, or did he look up and see these angels ascending and descending? But since he saw them, they couldn't have been too far away. So heaven isn't like way far away. It's in a different, I guess you'd say, different dimension or realm.
Yeah, if you want to go into the Star Trek situation, they're out of phase,
right? So
with us, so we don't visually see them.
To take a human being, a physical entity, off the earth into this other place, you would need a mechanical apparatus. You're right, to keep him alive. That's why Elisha saw Elijah go up in a spaceship. That's why Enoch went up in a spaceship. And we see Ezekiel as he's on the bank of that river, and he has his vision, and he sees this incredible sight of these vehicles coming down and describes them. So the idea that UFOs, like you're saying, Lou, started in the 1940s with Roswell and so forth, that's not true at all. They've been on the earth throughout antiquity.
Well, there's been reports of them, not in the manner that we call UFOs. And what I was referring to is, back in like 1946, we had what was called ghost rockets in Norway. That they could see what looked like rockets shooting through the sky. But it happened to be right at the time of the annual meteor shower that the world passes by, and they weren't sure if they were meteors or rockets or whatever.
But there's letters from early Roman centurions saying that they saw these vehicles in the sky, watching them. At the time of our nation, they saw vehicles in the sky. When
we've had several accounts
they come across to the Americas, they saw vehicles in the sky. We're talking hundreds of years ago and thousands of years ago.
Well, if you want to entertain yourself and not take something too seriously, you can watch the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, and they'll show you all the diagrams in the South America showing ideas of space people wearing astronaut outfits.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm not saying that they haven't been around since antiquity.
So what we're saying is that, yes, there are extraterrestrials. Yes, there are what we would call angels. That's just simply an office or a term.
I will use alien. And the reason I'm going to use the word alien is to this world, if you weren't born on this world, if you weren't made to exist on this world,
You're an alien.
you are alien. And it's that simple.
Right.
You are not, whether you are from, I don't care what planet we want to name, or
Vega.
I was actually trying to think of Riker's favorite planet.
Riker's favorite planet. I don't remember.
Yeah, the one with all the sex.
I don't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I don't either.
That was like from season 1.
Yeah.
Season 1 sucked.
Sorry, if listeners out there, feel free to write us and remind us. But whether it's that, or if you are the creator being that put all the energy together to form everything that there is, if he's an alien to this world.
Oh, yeah. How
if
many
it's
times
not from this world, it's alien.
Right.
Period.
How many times the disciples, let's take our Paul, who became an apostle, says that Satan is the god of this world.
Very much
Jesus
so.
said the devil's the god of this world. John says he's the god of this world, which means the true God, the creator of all
Who
things,
owns this world,
is an alien to this earth. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. So Jesus is an alien to this world. And what are we? We are aliens
We
and
become
strangers on this terra firma. This is not our world. So Christians, too, are aliens. A lot of people would laugh and agree with that. But realistically, we are to be aliens on this world. This is not our home.
well, we don't see things the same way as people of this world.
Let me share something regarding we talked about the holographic universe. I'd like to talk about that in a different segment more because it's very compelling. But let's talk about something else, and that is that everything that we can see, measure, taste, touch is all in our mind. People don't realize that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're getting into the idea of the whole theory of the Matrix movie.
Well,
If you're talking see, smell, taste, touch, you're talking electrical impulses into your brain and nothing more.
Let me give you a fundamental dynamic of our universe and everything it contains. It is made up of smaller substances. We would call them photons,
Subatomic particles.
subatomic particles, electrons, neutrons, neutrinos, even the Higgs. And what they are smaller particles that are in superposition. And if you don't know what superposition means, it means kind of like the words.
And they're there.
It means they're everywhere at one time, and nobody knows the extent of where everywhere is.
No, we
And they
definitely
only
believe it's multidimensional.
It only collapses down into being, quote, here when you observe it. Atoms aren't in one position. They're everywhere at once until they're observed or measured. So without conscious interaction, they don't take form. And this is what screws with the minds of a lot of physicists today.
Which is, again, the reason of they're starting to abandon the Big Bang. They've ran into this problem that when you get back to the point of the start, and it's what caused this to come into being.
When Einstein was confronted with this and understood the math and logic behind it, he says, he had a hard time with it. He says, you mean if I turn around, the moon isn't there anymore? No, because it's being observed by billions of other sentient life forms. What we have to understand is that
Once it becomes observed, it becomes locked in.
Well, that's another
it's
question.
there.
Does something once observed become locked in for eternity? Because that's not true. On smaller particles, such as an atom's always in superposition until it's measured.
A physicist will tell you that subatomic particles do not behave the way the macro exists.
Particles, like for instance,
Right.
the moon is comprised of trillions to I don't know how many power you've got of particles.
Mm-hmm.
All right, they've all cohesed into a solid form called matter, mass, or the moon, and it has properties that we can measure and we can understand. But
Right.
realistically, it's nothing but light.
I agree.
It's nothing but energy.
I understand totally.
collapse down.
I tried to explain this to a fellow Christian that was totally, they could not understand. Look, when we take the human body down to its particles, when we take a neutron and look into it, the only thing we find in it is a photon, or are photons. Photons are light energy with no mass. And his response was, well, then how come I weigh X amount of pounds? Yeah, and it's like, you just want to slap your forehead. Subatomic particles are not bound by the physics of this macroscopic world. They operate differently.
Right. Einstein came up with the formula. He didn't create the theory. He simply put it into a formula term, E equals mc squared, which means that if you take away the squared, energy and mass, or matter, are identical.
Right.
It just is how much energy is locked into that mass, which has been collapsed from superposition into a positional object. So therefore, plutonium or hydrogen, they can let off an incredible amount of power, which is where we get the bombs. Hydrogen bombs or atomic bombs. But they're actually the same substance, but the change is a violent change. You know, it's collapsed down, but when you change it back into energy, it's violent.
Very much
reaction. So our universe isn't what people think it is. So when you talk about life on other planets, there are so many possibilities that must cohese into a particular pattern in order for that to be achieved. You're saying that everything that we can observe on this earth, and we've come up with a philosophy and adapted that philosophy, science has, saying evolution. They grasp onto evolution. Well, you have to follow that out and say that the entire universe is made in the same way under the same principles that we are. That's biting off a lot. So
if you're a part of the secular community, who'd attach themselves.
Again,
but we also have this Christian community who thinks, well, God could have put people on other planets.
Again, we open up the door to
this collision of warring philosophies that both have attendant outcomes, and they're inconsistent.
And there's a lot of people hedging their bets now because science has grown tremendously in the last 50 years, last 20 years. Tremendously, they've made huge strides. The internet has burst open the floodgates to allow exchange of information at such a rapid pace, something that could only be done by letter or teletype or a phone call or a long, lengthy,
well, that was the whole
travel to a meeting.
Yeah, there may have been some wisdom in that.
But so we're growing at an exponential level, and so they say there is no end to where we can grow and what we can become.
No, but everything takes time.
Understood. But so Christians who happen to be, or other religious believers who happen to be not so, boned up on the science, they don't really understand it. They just know that science knows a lot, and they're intimidated, tremendously intimidated. So they will collapse their belief system to incorporate current scientific findings, such as, it seems that there's so many planets out there that could possibly have life, so I will readapt my theology and say, well, it's still God, and He created life on other planets.
Fine. Don't people understand the term or the definition of the term hypothesis?
No.
Science doesn't, the media doesn't project any of this as hypothesis. They make a statement.
But screw the media. The media,
you can't.
A bunch of prostitutes, stick them in fishnet stockings, stick them on a street corner in South Central Los Angeles, and they'll make a buck.
Take the Big Bang. Go to any school textbook. Open it up and start reading about it. It is presented as a fact.
Yes, it is.
It is not presented as a hypothesis.
Well, except that, with science moving away from the Big Bang model, they're all going to have egg on their face. Or they're going to have a bunch, well, of course,
but
you don't teach anything in school anymore anyway, so what difference does it
We
make?
go right back to what I was talking about earlier when we shifted from steady state theory over to the Big Bang. Science does this changing all the time because they run into a problem, the theory doesn't work. They come up with a new theory that seems to answer the problems they have at hand.
Like they're doing right now, moving away from string theory because it didn't answer all the questions, and all it was doing was breaking into factions.
Causing more problems.
You had 50 million different string theories.
You had loop theory, you had string theory.
You create chaos with the individuals in the meantime. When the news mandates, this is the way things are. When school systems mandate,
not just the news. It's also, you have to understand, a lot
Oh,
of
I'm
these
pissed
people,
off at this.
A lot of these people are driven by grant money and being published. Okay, and if you've mined a particular area for all it's worth, you know, you're up in the Klondike, you've blasted open the last vein, there's nothing there, you move on. You got to move on.
Right.
And so string theory's been mined to death. There's nothing left there. Didn't yield what they wanted. Let's move off to something else.
They just
And if
don't understand it
I
yet.
can be the first to publish a paper on this hypothesis, this theory, and gain some traction with it,
with some
well,
workable-
hell, I'm going to get the Nobel, and I'm definitely going to get some grant money.
Right, as long
And
as
then
I have
people
some
are gonna give me
workable
cash. I'm going to have girls. I'm going to have my car. I'm going to have my tweed friggin' jacket. The whole bit, okay? And that's primarily what has occurred right now with higher academia, is that it's publish or die. And that's all these people are interested in.
the problem is-
Look at Neil deGrasse Tyson, okay? Is he boning up on the books? Is he hitting the books? Or is he hitting the talk show circuit? There you go.
The problem is that when you present hypothesis as undeniable fact, which is what's happening,
Because who challenges them?
well, you mislead a generation.
They don't give a
Well,
dead rat's
we have
ass.
the
This
same,
is important.
We have the same problem going on with evolution. Yes, evolution.
When you screw with a faith base of a person,
Well, isn't that what we're doing?
what we're doing is we're trying to rebuff the people that are screwing with the faith bases of people. If you want to believe that God created the entire universe in 6 days, believe it, and you'll go to your death believing that, and that's okay.
And
because
that makes you happy. That makes you happy.
Well, you had faith. You're not measured by accuracy. You're measured by your thoughts and intentions, your faith base.
Tell that to your accountant.
That's a good one.
And depending on which accountant, you can have them work from the line of your refund to the beginning of your tax return. So,
Well, my point is that there's some glaring problems in the hypothesis as they exist, but when projected through the media and into the children's science textbooks, it appears it's a slam dunk fact. And to me, that pisses me off on one hand and is very frightening on the other, because you have children growing up that automatically reject God as silly and as a backwards thinking because science has proven that evolution is truth. But when you dig into evolution, no matter what anyone says out there, you find there are holes everywhere in it.
Exactly. And my bone of contention, and what pisses me off, is that the ones who should be pushing back, if you will, the Christian community, has their heads buried so far up their behinds that they don't see any of this
Because
going
it
on.
takes a lot of work.
Oh,
and
cry me a friggin' river. You know what? These people need to get out of behind the pulpit, which is not where they're supposed to be anyway, and doing their damn jobs. If you are going to opine on the creation, then take a little time to learn about the creation. Okay? Don't look through Genesis and say, well, it says day right here, D-A-Y. The Lord said day, so it means day. You know, give me
Right. They don't understand. They don't understand. I agree with you. There's not too many, I would say, gifted theologians these days. There's
And that
not
was
too
my
many
whole
hard-working
point.
theologians.
With respect to Carl Sagan's Contact, when they put Matthew McConaughey as the religious conscious there, and he was more like a Joel Osteen. And Joel Osteen knows nothing. Joel Osteen himself has said, I'm not really much into the theology, but, I'm into positive thinking and blah, and great. He's got this huge following, and all they come to his church and they get ice cream and chocolate cookies.
Yeah, the problem with this is, again, with saying hypothesis is fact, is people live and die through these eras. Stephen Hawking is going to die. He'll pass away.
We'll all die.
No, he's going to pass away shortly. And
you know what? I wouldn't necessarily put him on your Deadpool list just yet.
No, I don't mean
in
that.
There quite a while,
right? But he'll pass away shortly, and then he'll find out what real truth is. Everyone does. Now, in his mind, he will go to his grave believing that when he shuts his eyes, it shuts off and shuts down, just like you unplug a TV monitor. It's gone. Right. And he's going to his shock and amazement, when he closes his eyes and breathes his last, he'll be far more aware than he was in his living shell, and he'll be free.
Yeah.
And he'll learn, and he's going to have tremendous remorse.
I think he'll be pleasantly surprised.
Well, he'll be pleasantly surprised, but like all of us, we'll have tremendous remorse on the things we've done, the way we comported ourselves. The judgment comes from ourselves.
Nah, I'll be fine. I'm good.
I'll be all right.
No, we will all see the errors of our way.
Son of a bitch.
We'll all see the errors of our way. But
Sure we will.
in the meanwhile, I hope this radio program is a part of that. You have to champion the oppressed, and the oppressed are those that are under the oppression of the public systems, which are filling both the airwaves and filling the books with what I think are error.
Okay, you know what? Lenin said it best.
John Lennon?
Vladimir Lenin, when he called them useful idiots. And that's exactly what they are. They're useful idiots.
Who are?
The people, the masses.
The masses.
And when you're in power, the thing that you need to do is keep the masses in control. Now, this goes all the way back to the Celestials, who wielded power, rewards and punishments to keep the masses in control. The only one who really defied that school of thought was Christ. Christ wanted us to be peers in a
Right.
sense. No one else does. Everyone else is, do this or I'll kill you. Whether it's Hillary Clinton, who thinks that we are the stupidest people on the planet, holy mackerel, don't even get me started there, or Vladimir Lenin, or Emperor Nero, or Caligula, or Tiberius. Fill in the blank. It doesn't really matter. It is do it their way or I'll kill you. It is rewards and punishments. It is don't learn too much because then you become a threat to me. And they don't want competition. Christ came in with this confidence and understanding that as part of the kingdom of heaven, he needs us to be mature. We need to be able to think. We need to be able to reason. We need to be able to transcend this temporal realm with its limitations, with its limited resources, limited time, our mortality.
Right.
He didn't look at that from that perspective, and he didn't want us to look at it from that perspective either. And yet everything else around, whether it's an ET or just some tin horn dictator, looks at it that way.
We're talking about the potential of extraterrestrials and their existence, and how would that affect the Christian faith? I think that's what this is about.
That was part of it.
I go back to the whole fact that when we start talking about extraterrestrial involvement with mankind mankind immediately starts having paranormal activity happening around them. Mm-hmm. And there are cases where this stuff starts happening, the paranormal activity starts happening, and the person invokes the name of Jesus, and all of a sudden it all stops. It all goes away. Why?
I don't know, but as a fair contest, if it ever happens, invoke the name of Allah and see what happens.
I'm going to use
or Muhammad.
I'm using Buddha.
Yeah, I don't know if Buddha would help.
Well, he doesn't have any gods anyway, so his is just
You're trying to tie in the fact that paranormal activity and alien activity.
I'm not tying it in.
Tied together.
From all the research I've done, it's a stated fact that it happens.
Right. There is,
in fact, one of the researchers said the problem with extraterrestrial search right now is science automatically poo-poos the paranormal activity that follows afterwards. And we're talking to a man that's a secular humanist. He doesn't buy into the idea of Jesus. He thinks that's a fable.
Let's see what Paul said about extraterrestrials. Fair?
Sounds
he
good.
spoke a lot about it, and people don't realize that. He says,
what in specific are you referring to?
He comes right out and says, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against what? Rulers?
Against the rulers and principalities of this heavenly realm.
As opposed to the terrestrial realm. It's
but see, you take the leap that the secular or even the Christian community would equate what he's speaking of in the spiritual sense. The Christian community dismisses it. Well, it's just Satan. They're just talking about Satan, damn it.
No,
It's more than that.
Right. But he's speaking specifically about rulers and authorities in the heavenly realms. The heavenly realms at that time, according to the Greek, was above the terra firma, above terrestrial. So
should be
they
the
were
same now.
extraterrestrial. And so that's what our battle's against. There was always the influx of these types of beings from the extraterrestrials to the terrestrial. If you go to the Sumerian culture, which is the oldest culture that popped out of nowhere, and to this day, nobody can say how they came into existence.
Yeah, we don't have any
That
traces
society
of
sprung up out of
them
nowhere.
coming to that spot. It's just they were there.
There's like 18,000 clay tablets at least. I mean, there's probably more than that by today's count. And they haven't deciphered more than, I think, 20% of them. They'll be working on that for the next 100 years. When they come across business as usual, receipts, trades, etc., they accept it as fact. But there's an equal amount of seals and tablets that talk about the Anunnaki, that talk about these beings that came down from above and interacted with them and started their society. They come right out and they chisel into their monuments these beings and show that they had flight. They were 50% taller than they were. These beings showed them clearly how many planets were in our solar system, and we only found out in the 1930s they were correct. But they knew this 6,000 years ago, more than that. So, and they also knew that one of our planets was blue in color. They also knew one revolved backwards as opposed to our forwards. They knew these things, but in an era that was impossible to know. So Ancient Aliens takes hold of this and says, showed you. There was ancient aliens that came down. Well, we already know that.
Well, but we don't call them
aliens.
We don't recall them ancient aliens.
Right.
You know, Eric von Däniken, when he wrote Chariots of the Gods way back in 1970, 71, 72, something like that.
Something like that.
Introduced the modern era, if you will, to much of this. The Nazca lines, the
crystal skulls.
The whole bit. I mean, it's an interesting book. And I read it through a couple of times. There was a follow-up by Clifford Wilson, who's a Christian professor, and he wrote a book called Crash Go the Chariots, which was a direct response to Eric von Däniken's book, and he wrote it around the same time. It came out, and this was his response. And he actually, I heard him speak on a number of different occasions, was able to ask him some questions. I wish I could ask him now. I'd know a lot more, but he dismissed most of everything that von Däniken said through basic traditional Christian orthodoxy.
Right. Yeah.
And, I've been gearing up to reread his book because I think it might be relevant with this podcast. But the bottom line for me is Clifford Wilson, while I respect him and I respect the research he did, brushed aside way too many things that just are a matter of fact because it didn't fit with orthodoxy. One of the things was he completely dismissed the Book of Enoch because, as I said, he wrote his book in, I think, 1972.
Prior to the Dead Sea Scrolls being revealed.
He did not know about the Dead Sea. Now, he knew Enoch. And in a Q&A that he printed in the back of his book, he addressed Enoch and the whole situation with the Watchers, the Nephilim, the whole thing, and he dismissed it as all Gnostic material. No, it didn't happen.
Well, and that
because
was a common...
it hadn't come out yet. So he put in... I've often pondered that because it's a perspective that I didn't have to face. My understanding, my knowledge of Enoch came after the release of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Vatican's...
It's what spurred me to actually bother reading the Book of Enoch was the fact that the Dead Sea Scrolls had it. And
yeah, but a lot of people who were theologians or studying theology prior to that time,
even today,
a lot of these, what they call pseudepigraphal works or Gnostic works, Deuterocanonical works, they had to study in seminary.
Well, even today, with what we know of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we know of the Book of Enoch, they're afraid to break orthodoxy. and
Is it that
embrace
they're
the book.
afraid to break orthodoxy, or is it when, like a child, when you learn things in your formative years, it's hard to shake loose of because it becomes a part of your consciousness?
That's my point. Is both my boys were attending a college where theology is taught, and they've talked with a couple of their instructors about the Book of Enoch. And
they crossed their fingers and said, "Get away from me, Satan! Or get thee behind me."
Not
Satan.
quite, but they'll say, it has a lot of potential, but
potential.
This is the wording.
What does that mean?
This is the wording they use. It has a lot of potential to be scripture, but it wasn't canonized, and we just really can't trust it. And that's
an interesting. We need to go there one of these days, because when a person says to me, "Well, it's not part of the canon," well, okay. Can you name one person that was a member of that council that did canonize the scriptures? Just
Most
one.
people can't.
All I want is one name.
Right.
That's just one. There were over 360 of them. I just
think it
want
was 70.
one name.
like 70 of them total that had the guts to show up.
No. Constantine set out an invitation to about 2,300 of the
council?
bishops
Right.
around the empire. About 360 actually showed up.
That's
Because
true.
most of them thought it was a trap.
Right.
Because at that time, even with the Edict of Milan, it was still an outlaw religion, and they weren't all on board with the fact that this guy wasn't herding them in for the slaughter, which was a reasonable
safe assumption.
belief. Okay, so a fraction of those invited show up. Most of them are from his side of the empire, western side of the empire, and they're the ones that put together or chose the books to be used. So all I want is one name. Just give me one, not Constantine's, because he was more or less reliant upon these scholars.
I still
one
think
name.
Constantine pulled them all
One
together
name.
and said, "This is what I want."
The deal is, few could give you one name of any of the people who showed up. I could give you a couple,
Right.
because they were bishops of near towns and churches, and they were part of that. But to what end? My point is that they will dismiss the Book of Enoch because it's not canonized, but they know nothing of how the canon was put together.
Well, even if they do, it comes down to they're afraid to break orthodoxy.
The concept of 66 books being canonized as the Word of God with 44 authors, and they uphold one another perfectly, is a very difficult concept
Sola Scriptura.
to break. And you're never going to get around that.
Never is a long time.
It is a long time. It's been that way. Eventually, I think people will do a little research.
Say never, and then use eventually.
I use it just kind of a... Anyway,
As much as people
you'll have trouble
love to
getting
talk
around
with.
that, I'm saying.
I've ran into a few other people out there that have actually done some research on their own, and they understand where the Bible came from, how it was put together.
Really? Who are they?
Not very many, but I can name a couple of them.
People have in their mind a set and firm foundation of what they think they believe. If you were to sit down and talk to them about it, they have a difficult time getting it out of their brain. People will say, I can write a book with what I know, and you get them into 2 or 3 pages and they're done. They're not as deep as they think they are, and they haven't researched as much as they thought they did. They simply can agree with a pastor who speaks. They can simply agree with a radio presentation. They can listen to a James Dobson and agree with it, but they really can't teach it. They don't know what's going on.
You see, and that's the whole thing comes down to is we have men of power, and I'm not being sexist. I'm just using men as mankind of power. They're pastors or teachers. They're on TV. They're on radio. They pastor 5,000-seat churches, and they'll come out and tell you this is what the Word of God says.
Right.
And they don't take the initiative to say, wait a minute, what does it say in the original text?
Because who wants to sit through that? For the love of God, who wants to sit through a boring, droning,
No, I'm talking about them doing it on their damn own. The same way I did it, the same way Mark's done it, the same way you've done it.
Nobody gives a damn. Look,
Why not?
I
gave a damn. I had too many damn questions that weren't being answered by orthodoxy.
To like it, and so I study it. But that's me. Most people, they don't. They just don't.
I
don't care.
just had too much crap. Orthodox said, "Well, you got to believe this," and you look at it, and it doesn't fit. The God of the Old Testament's bipolar. What do you mean?
So when you take orthodoxy and you ask the question of, are there extraterrestrials? Is there life on other planets? You have kind of a meltdown.
For the most part, there are some hardliners who will just, no, it's all Satan. It's all Satan.
Well, that's because that's a lazy answer that no one wants to do the research on. It takes time. For where I'm at,
people are afraid of the unknown.
Where I'm at this particular juncture, I would have to be shown proof positive that our universe is not holographic. That's number one, because I'm entertaining that in a way, based on the Genesis account versus modern science and where we're going. I also understand how
I take a contrarian point of view.
I also understand how mass is created. All mass that we know of is subject. It's malleable to consciousness. Now, a scientist will disagree, but if they really give it some thought, they'll understand that that's true.
If you hold to a wave function collapse type of belief, which the double slit experiment seems to validate.
Well, that's a simple experiment, yeah, but
it's a validation.
It's the
evidence.
validation must be contemplated and must be set over here and say, okay, if at a micro level, if
it must be repeatable.
At a micro level,
repeatable.
if energy, if microparticles are subject to consciousness, then what on a macro level? Is there a possibility of that? You have to ask that question, because everything's made up of microparticles. Any macro substance, whether it be the planet Earth or the sun or solar system or anything, any heavenly body out there, and all galaxies are
a hydrogen atom
then you've
is
answered
made up
your
of
question.
subatomic particles.
Then you've answered your question.
Well, you have to entertain that as a scientist.
Well, I entertain it.
So you have to ask yourself, is the universe malleable to consciousness? And you have to answer that question truthfully. Yes, the universe is malleable to conscious interaction. Now, that's a big statement, but it's a fact. That's why today the pilot wave theory has been dredged back up from the 1930s, 20s and 30s, because they want to show that they want to disassociate consciousness from the equation.
Yes, I get that.
And they're having a horrible time, because if you follow through, not just with the logic, but if you follow through with the formula, you'll find that consciousness had to start the Big Bang that they talk about.
So because they refuse to acknowledge the findings, absent an agenda, just going on the naked evidence, we're getting contrivances, backpedaling, and essentially deceit, which goes to my earlier thought that these folks are interested primarily in grant money, fame, fortune, etc.
Well, also, they have adopted a philosophy. For instance, if you're...
Again, would your accountant do this crap?
No, but if you're a scientific atheist, and an atheist is simply a position of thought. But if you're a scientific atheist, which is different, you do the research to back up your findings.
Well, then you can't be an atheist.
How can you prove that God doesn't exist?
Well, you can never do that. But
that's my point. You can't be
you can't ever do that.
You can't be a scientific atheist. At most, you can be a
but
scientific
if you're
agnostic.
Richard Dawkins, who's a scientific atheist, okay, that's what
I thought he was a blowhard.
Well, that too. But if you're a scientist, I think Neil Tyson is an atheist. I'm not sure. Sometimes he says things that make me think. I know that Dawkins at times has shown real tenderness to God, but I think maybe that's because he's looked on so proudly by the Vatican that he doesn't want to hurt anybody. At other times, he tries to say there is no God, there's no need for a God.
Richard Dawkins has been pretty dogmatic in the fact that there's no God.
Hawking's
talking about
Stephen
Hawking.
Stephen Hawking is a different situation
Right.
altogether. Richard Dawkins has been militant anti-God.
Well, that's because he's ignorant, and he doesn't realize he's ignorant. His position, he tries to support his... In other words, he has a position, and then he's doing everything within his power to support that
Yeah,
position.
he's made a he's
And
made
then
a handsome living
to tear down
off of this.
the holes in other positions that believe
He's
in.
torn down nothing.
Well, in his mind, he has.
In his mind, he has, and for the simple-minded who have read his books and believe what he says, I agree. But his arguments are as bunkered as are Billy Graham's with respect to extraterrestrials and C.S. Lewis's. It's all within this framework of orthodoxy. If Richard Dawkins was really genuine in his assertion that there was no God, he would step out of orthodoxy and he would explore it naked on the evidence presented.
Well,
he will not do it.
Well, no, he thinks he has.
He hasn't done a damn
No,
thing.
he thinks he has by examining a Catholic type faith.
That's orthodoxy.
Right.
That's
Right.
mega orthodoxy.
So he's staying in it. It's almost like a biologist that would totally eliminate all evidence except for a few different pieces. He's doing the same with, quote, religion. He's already put it aside, saying it doesn't work and it's wrong based on a very myopic look into it. He doesn't understand.
That would be generous.
Right. So Dawkins is a good biologist. He understands the premises quite well. I would say he's gifted. However, where he lacks is that he doesn't. He thinks that biology starts with a primordial
cesspool.
I'm getting tired. Cesspool of soup. Okay, the right ingredients come together through upward causation, and finally with electricity through the atmosphere or whatever.
A bolt of lightning comes
Boom.
down, and instead of
You
frying
have-
everything in the soup, it
You have
gave
the
it
first
life.
amino acids and proteins necessary to create life. Well, that's not where it starts, and this is where every biologist fails. All material that will cohese into what we call the primordial. How do you say that?
Primordial.
Primordial soup
cesspool.
is a macro manifestation of micro energy. The micro energy to manifest into macro physicality can only occur through one process and one process only: conscious interaction.
Okay, so drilling down, just so that everybody's on page. What you're saying is that when you take an atom and you cut it in half and you go drilling down smaller quarks, subatomic particles, down, eventually you come down to essentially a unit of energy, a photon.
An indivisible unit of. They used to call those strings. I don't know if they still do, and they vibrate.
Some people still do.
They vibrate at different tones, which attract like. Now, we don't know what they look like. They could be triangular, they could be straight, squiggly, they could be circular. We have no idea. No one does. But there is a point where there's an indivisible
And
product.
This is energy.
It is pure energy.
Okay, and that's where we're getting to.
Mm-hmm.
So that irrespective of its size to us,
Right.
be it a Buick, be it the Empire State Building, be it Jupiter, at its essence, they're all the same thing.
Right.
These units of energy. If they're strings and they vibrate at a particular frequency and they attract like frequencies, etc., that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But underlying the essential belief is that these are just indivisible units
Now
or
watch
particles
this.
of energy,
Now watch-
which came into being from a wave of energy which was indiscernible and collapsed based upon conscious observation.
Right. When you take, for instance, the I would have to say the myopic or kindergarten attitude that there was a super compressed mass of energy, and that's where the Big Bang came out
The
of.
singularity.
The singularity. It's really grasping at nothing, because what it's made up of, what that particular ball is made up of, we say super compressed energy, on a lower level is nothing but these tiny individual pieces of energy that are indivisible. There is a bottom line.
There has to be.
Now, we have to ask ourselves this question: where did those particular pieces of energy come from? See, the Big Bang is said to have created the universe. Let's set that aside for a moment. Where
Did it create
did
the universe, or did it create the things in the universe?
I don't agree with it at all. I think it's a very
No, I don't
sloppy,
either, but
a very sloppy way to address the origin of our universe. Very, very sloppy. But it goes over the heads of most people, and so it's acceptable. But you have to define that particular supercompressed piece of supposed energy that is made up of smaller pieces of energy to the point where they're indivisible at a position far, far smaller. You have to ask yourself, where did it come from? Screw everything else.
Well, yeah, and that's what bedevils them. And
Well,
so you
bedevils them.
Right.
It's the most important question of all. If you can't answer that question, everything else is nothing but a fairy
Well,
tale.
I believe Stephen Hawking did answer that question by saying
The
that
butt end of a black
it was
hole?
yeah.
Well,
Black
that is
holes
so asinine.
Black holes create other universes.
That's so stupid.
Well-
that is the most stupid.
well,
His theory of black holes is simply it's a wastegate. Matter comes into this universe from an antimatter universe. Our antimatter dumps.
First
into
of all,
the
we
other
don't
universe.
even know if black holes exist.
their theory.
They're a theory. Regardless of what any
Well-
cosmologist says, black holes are a theory. And we can find where they supposedly are based on the absence of light or
But
certain
is that
criteria.
dark matter or black hole?
We don't even know if dark matter exists.
We don't know if dark matter.
That's
is.
all. That's all an
But that's,
idea.
That's where we're running to right now.
We don't know if dark energy exists. That's all.
Well, it's all the same. Dark
It's-
energy. Dark,
What about
No,
the
they're
dark
different.
side of the force?
Yes. But now, let me
that's
show
it.
you the fatality of a black hole creating a universe. How totally I won't even give it this word. But how many black holes have we discovered in our universe?
I have no clue.
Okay, at first it was a real rare
couple.
occurrence. No.
Yeah, it
Now
was like-
they're starting
Well, I
to
mean,
find.
I know there's at least a couple out
They're
there.
in our own galaxy. They know there's a huge one supposedly at the center, but they're starting to find them all over the place. We're talking thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands. They're going to find millions upon millions upon millions. Okay, what you're saying is, now if the energy collapsed into those supposed black holes, the excrement on the other side is creating new universes. Yay! Clapped hands by the upward causational evolutionists who believe in the no God theory. That means there are billions of universes being created at a phenomenal rate, because you have to ask yourself, how many universes can be created through one black hole?
Well, my question.
Let's follow this through, though, for a minute. How many universes can be, every time it collapses down stars in the area and so forth, debris pulled in, whatever, it's a collapsed star itself. At the butt end, you have a new universe. How many does it pop out? That one black hole. Then if you look at the multiplicity of black holes in a universe and say that, are they good for one black hole? Are they good for one universe? Are they good for an infinite amount of universes?
They're good for interdimensional.
Let's reverse that. How many universes outside of our universes, because supposedly we were created that way? If that's the case in point, then our universe should have been infiltrated with other universes being created within our universe exponentially, and we'd have been totally destroyed by now.
Maybe.
Also, the singularity, that it could simply pop into existence, if you look at it carefully, then we should pop out of existence in the same way at any moment in time. So I don't like what's happening. The reason Hawking has gone down that road is because parallel universes seem to answer the question of the cosmological balances in our universe. They know that some of these cosmological balances are so precise, and I mean they're so precise that it is computer impossible to match them. Our universe is so delicately balanced that if one little thing was out of tune, to the tiniest degree, carbon-based life couldn't exist. So in order to buttress the fact that we are an evolved creation, that's an oxymoron, we're an evolved situation. We've come into existence by accident, supposedly. In order to buttress that up, you have to find a way to create an infinite amount of other universes so that you can say in those other universes, there's chaos and there is no carbon-based life. Maybe there's silicon-based life. Maybe there's no life at all. Or maybe there's a life identical to ours, and everything you can imagine in this life has happened in the X amount of lives in other universes.
Following the logic of Stephen Hawking's hypothesis with respect to black holes being a gateway to another universe.
So bad.
Well, all right, but here's my problem with it. That there could be a multiplicity of universes I will accept on its face for right now. Just put it aside. Because we don't know in what dimensional plane other things can exist. I'm going to set that aside for the moment. My problem is this. Why do we immediately jump to the conclusion that a black hole in this universe is a doorway into a different dimensional plane?
It solves
that doesn't seem
problems
to
for them.
follow logic. Secondly, if you've got the material from a collapsed star and it can create an entire universe on par with ours, that would be a hell of a trick because you've only got a finite amount of material to begin with. I can't take a nickel and turn it into $1 million without adding stuff to it. You see what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
So I have a problem there. And if you're saying that, well, when it goes through the hole in this dimensional transference, things change, well...
That's the singularity.
At what point do you have to now suspend rational thought and just delve into complete science fiction?
They believe an equal amount of matter and antimatter was created in the explosion, which balances things, and it keeps growing and accelerating. For instance,
how does it grow?
If you compress,
what is it like? Those what do they call them? Those special crystals you stick in an aquarium and they just kind of grow on their own. What the hell is this?
let me show you how. Let me show you how base science is at this point, and how much they lack. Nobody understands mitosis.
Okay, I'm not trying.
That's simple.
I'm not trying to diss science. Science has been wonderful, but when I'm dissing these particular individuals who are sitting back, collecting grant money, and doing what I do here for free, which is make up crap for my stories.
Okay. Take every bit of let's take the mass in the universe. All that is collapsed down to mass. That would incorporate.
I don't know how much that is.
Suns,
it's
planets.
An unknown
okay, well,
number.
The universe is far bigger than we ever thought.
Okay, so it's an unknown.
When you go back to Hoyle, when you go back to the early telescopes, Hubble discovered how big the universe. He discovered that there were other galaxies out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so but if you collapse everything down into one big marble,
I have no clue.
If you collapse all matter,
I'll be honest, I have no clue.
Mass down to one big marble,
it'd weigh a few pounds.
Okay, and you compress it.
It'd be tough
you
to
take
lift.
out all the space out of it. See, in science's table, they say, well, if you do that, you can make it the size of a microscopic particle.
It'd fall.
I got one word for that: crap. That is crap. That is crap. That's crap. That's crap. Yet they fed that to an audience of billions, and an audience of billions says, well, they know the science better, so they must be right. No.
You do know that back in the latter part of the 18th century, that the preeminent theory in medicine with respect to anatomy was that the body was ruled by 4 humors, correct? These were 4 fluid balances. You see there was blood, bile...
And that was considered fact
and
back
I
then.
forget what it was, the other 2. Anyway, my point is that the reason that George Washington died without seeing the 19th century is because he caught a flu bug of some sort or another, and his physician, who was preeminent in his day, diagnosed an imbalance in his humors, and so he bled Washington.
To death.
To death. Because the one thing you don't want to do with somebody who's trying to stave off a viral infection is bleed him, because you deprive him of the white blood cells that his body needs to fight off the friggin'
bad
infection. Well, the science at that time, as advanced as it was for their day, had no clue. No clue.
That's where we're at today.
Well, and I would like to think that we're above that.
No, we're not.
But what I struggle with is when we step out of what we know and we start postulating these hypotheses and that's all they are. And we have taken the term hypothesis and we have replaced it with the term fact.
Well, when they achieve a level of success in the experiment they're conducting, they immediately want to say that their theory is fact. For instance, take the CERN.
Well, I was about to mention
particle
CERN.
accelerator, right?
Right.
Okay, now They found supposedly the Higgs, that they've been Higgs boson they're looking for. Sure enough,
For our listeners, you better explain what the Higgs Boston is.
Higgs Boston,
Did I say Boston?
Higgs in Boston.
That's a place in Massachusetts. But
There's some questions they had regarding how matter is formed. Anyway, let me deflect from that for a minute. In the CERN experiments, they are moving small particles to near the speed of light, like 99 point some odd times percent of the speed of light, and they then want to crash them together to see what the reaction will be, and they think it's like what would happen at the Big Bang, and so they can then say, okay, this is what happened, and here's what was projected, and it achieved what we thought would happen, and look, we found the Higgs, and etc. But what they don't like to tell the people out there is that when you smash protons together, you're smashing collapsed particles from superposition, because your intent in the experiment has collapsed them.
Yes.
Okay, so realistically,
but you're getting into a point of the experiment that they don't want to address.
No, they don't want to address it.
Screws up the model.
right, because the moment they observe the experiment, they screw the experiment
because of
up.
their observation at every level of that experiment. It is a jaded experiment, and they don't want to tell people this. But what's going to happen is supposed to happen the way it does happen. Okay, so you're working with tinker toys. You really are. It's.
You would have to sell the populace on the notion of the wave field to begin with, okay? And that's a hard sell, because you're not going to find unanimity amongst physicists.
No, a lot of physicists understand the idea that everything is in superposition. All particles are, even those protons. They're in superposition. They're collapsed down when we observe them, or when we measure them. So when we observe, we measure, and we collide them, we're looking at basically a fixed situation.
A predictable outcome.
It is it's a very predictable outcome.
And that's why they haven't found whatever it is they're looking for.
They're going to find exactly what they're supposed to find. But it's all nothing but, it's almost like kindergarten. It sounds crazy, but we're working with a fixed outcome. You've got these.
So why don't we invite, if this particular episode happens to find its way to any theoretical physicists out there who are disgusted by what we're saying, intrigued by what we're saying, or surprised by what we're saying, to offer a counterpoint. Is wave function collapse real? Is our application of our understanding of wave function collapse valid? If so, why are we bothering with something like CERN? Is it because of the money? Because there's a hell of a lot of money that's been generated by CERN, okay? And it employs a lot of people. And I get that they're trying to find what they call the God particle, but to my understanding, with my very limited knowledge of physics, the pivotal word there would be, or relevant word is particle. If we're dealing with a wave, and this wave collapses, condenses, whatever you want to call it, into a particle upon observation, shouldn't the goal be to somehow explore the wave?
Well, they do that. The problem is that the results aren't the same. What has to be honestly looked at is that every particle is in superposition.
Yes. They don't know the parameters of the
That's why it's
position.
called a wave. They don't know. No one even knows where it is until it's measured. Why on earth would a particle take form when a human measures it? That's the question.
That is the question.
Why? And I've talked to a couple of physicists about this. They would say that a detector in some of those experiments, you could use a fly and the fly would work. Mm-hmm. So it's any conscious interaction causes a particle to to become what we call a solid.
So we talked about this earlier. So the fly is adequate, but
Yeah.
bacterium is not.
We don't know that.
Well, it couldn't be because bacterium exists all over the place.
We don't know any of that. We are so rudimentary in our understanding about wave function collapse. There are those that can speculate, but we don't know.
We know enough that wave function collapse is there because we've done the double slit experiment, and there's times when it's not observed that the wave acts like a wave, and you get a wave effect. And there's times when it's observed and the wave acts like a particle, and you get a particle effect.
Classical physicists want to say that that's not how it works. And so they will jump on board with the pilot wave theory to show that there's no need for consciousness. Consciousness is the damning problem.
Right. They will say velocity is what is the collapsing
right.
of the
So
wave function. Not
they want to get
consciousness.
rid of conscious interaction because conscious interaction is like the pin, and that's what the linchpin to everything. And there's a lot of physicists that jumped on board with that and realized that this universe couldn't come into existence without conscious interaction, which is who? God.
Well, says you. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. And there's a very good reason I don't believe that. In case anybody's interested. I know that you believe it.
Right.
But the reason I don't believe it is that all things being equal, were it to be God, God Almighty, God the Father, God who's everywhere and everything and what have you, then we could have never been able to have performed even one experiment because his mere presence anywhere would have nullified that experiment. The wave would immediately collapse. However, if it were at the conscious level of the, say, celestial creators, that's a whole different story.
That's something to look
where
into.
I put it. So, no, I don't think it's God because God is everywhere. It would nullify the experiment. But these celestial beings are not everywhere. They're not omniscient. They're not omnipotent. Okay? They have what's the word I'm looking for? I'm gone. Anyway, they have limits. There is where it would apply. That is continuity. That's consistency. That's where I put it. And that fits perfectly with the model that I'd conceptualized, which is God gave them the vacant lot, gave them the raw material, they have to build on it. Take this crap, build this. Build me something. Okay, for those of you out there who don't understand any of this, of what I'm talking about, read my books.
So in regards to who here believes that there's extraterrestrial life, and in the sense of aliens on other worlds?
Extraterrestrial life as outlined or defined by the secular community at large, I do not. I don't believe that life in that respect or regard exists anywhere else in this universe except for right here. I believe that what we've encountered are on a lower level, a more rudimentary level, demonic entities, and on a higher level, malevolent spiritual entities.
With that said, my thoughts are that I tend to go along with you, but I'm kind of like, I want to see some evidence. And if the evidence is presented in the sense of, like, for instance, a spaceship actually does land, the beings are seen by humans, and they're interviewed, let's say, much like in the movie V, I'd like to talk with them.
Yeah, but what if they're here to serve mankind?
Like in the movie V.
Yeah.
Actually, I was thinking the Twilight Zone 1962 episode, Serve Mankind.
I know my view is not popular, but I tend to look at this temporal plane, all of its universe, no matter how big it is like the 1 terabyte hard drive with a little bit of text on it. Is it a waste of space? Sure. Is it of any consequence? No. Why? Because God is eternal, and in his realm, there is no loss of resource. So the universe can be 1,000,000 times as big as we think it is right now, and it's of little consequence. Is it magnificent? Sure. Is it awe-inspiring? Of course. Is it a waste of space? Define a waste of space. If it's serving the purpose that he set out for it to serve, no. If all you have is a 1 terabyte hard drive, that's all you can get your hands onto to store 16 bits of text. It's not a waste of space. It's what you've got. It's what you've utilized, and it does the job quite adequately. Can you put more crap in it? Sure. And if we had the technology to build spaceships and fly to different planets, we could certainly spread out and fill up the 1 terabyte hard drive. Will we? Who knows? Maybe eventually, if we're allowed to stay here long enough, certainly all things being equal, we should be able to. Will we? Don't know.
Right. There's a lot of I don't know
But
in this equation.
what I do know is that we're all going to exit this place sooner rather than later. And what our thoughts on this terrestrial plane are will become irrelevant, because when we transition to the eternal essence that we truly are, absent these bodies, like you said, Stephen Hawking will know, Richard Dawkins will know, just as Christopher Hitchens now knows.
Right. We get into the fact that when we argue God, especially when we're talking with atheists, and we're arguing whether God exists or doesn't exist, I always come back to, you can't prove God doesn't exist. I can't prove 100% God does exist. But when we become room temperature, we will know.
We will know. But what I don't want to have is that I find that the secular community and the religious community share much of the same real estate.
They do.
And they don't realize it. They think they're at odds with one another, but gosh, from where I'm standing, they're twins.
Well, so far in my views, I've only found science tend to prove that there is a God. I see,
if they're honest, but they're not honest.
They back themselves into a corner. They don't think they are, but they wind up backing themselves in the corner, just like we've been discussing wave function. All of a sudden, it's like, what happened? Who was the one that saw this? I heard another guy say it. That's asked, do you believe in the Big Bang Theory? He goes, sure, and I believe in the one that pulled the trigger too. Because I go back to Fred Hoyle, who, like I said before, created the solid state theory. He hated the Big Bang Theory for one reason. He was a diehard atheist, and he said it is too much like creationism. There has to be a starting point. And that was his big hang-up with the Big Bang Theory, is that at one point you have to have something cause it to happen. And for an atheist, I can understand why he didn't like it. Because really, when you look at the Big Bang Theory, when you boil it all the way down to the very end,
later on he came to believe in God.
There has to be a point where it's like, this is it.
And a lot of them do, and you generally when
even Einstein was
away from you, and you begin to look at life differently. You've slayed the dragons that you set out to slay, or maybe not. Now you just no longer are capable. Life takes on a different meaning, and it's different for everybody. Some people go to the grave, just very resistant, and others come to an acceptance. I've seen far more come to an acceptance, or at least heard of far more coming to an acceptance than not, which is fine. We all have our paths that we take.
Even Einstein, always held out for the possibility of a God.
Well, now he knows for sure.
Right.
Well, we got to wrap up this episode. I think we've mined this subject for all it's worth for the moment. We'll certainly revisit it. I will conclude for now. So, for
Mark Wilson,
Lou Rogers,
I am Chase Rockwell saying so long until the next time you find yourself across the cosmos.
Send any questions or comments to us via email at info@acrossthecosmos.com. Also, visit us on the web at www.acrossthecosmos.com for show updates, news, and other important information. No part of this podcast may be used without the express written permission from the staff of Across the Cosmos. Across the Cosmos is a production of Omite Corporation. Copyright 2015.